I couldn't believe it when I found a letter from Diana in my mailbox. Diana had just passed away, and we had her funeral yesterday. She was always so kind to me, especially since I got married. We used to go out to eat and shop together, and we became close friends even though she was older than me. I was really sad when she suddenly passed away. Even after her funeral, it was hard to believe she was gone. So when I saw a letter from Diana, I was shocked. I hurried to read it and discovered something surprising. Diana had arranged for this letter to reach me after she passed away. She had asked the church's pastor to give it to me. In the letter, Diana told me to open a secret door in her closet at my in-laws' house. She explained how to do it and said I should go alone. I checked the time and knew everyone would be out. Jimmy, Diana's brother-in-law, his wife, and their kids were at school or work. So I went straight to my in-laws' house, used my key, and followed Diana's instructions. Luckily, the secret door opened, and inside, I found a message. It said, "My name is Olivia. I'm 35 years old, and I work as a web designer from home. 5 years ago, I married Fred, who is 4 years older than me. We were introduced by a friend, and we still have a great relationship. However, despite our desire for children, my husband Fred and I hadn't been able to conceive. Diana was always supportive during this tough time. She would tell me not to worry, and she often cheered me up by suggesting we go to a new waffle shop by the station to lift my spirits. Diana's encouragement helped me overcome my worries about not having children. Even though I still wanted kids, Fred and I decided not to pursue intensive fertility treatments and instead hoped for things to happen naturally. Fred traveled a lot for work, so when he was away, Diana and I would spend time together, going out for meals or shopping. We became good friends despite our age difference. Diana lived nearby, in the same house as my brother-in-law Jimmy and his family, who had 3 children. While Diana got along well with them, Jimmy and his wife weren't as understanding. They would often make hurtful remarks about our childlessness. Brittany, Jimmy's wife, would say things like, "Olivia, still no kids? We have 3 adorable ones, you know. It's like you're dishonoring your parents by not having any. Just cut ties with Diana already." Jimmy would join in, adding insults like, "Brittany's right." Well, Fred has always been a bit of a loser. Even if you had kids, they'd probably be losers too. At first, Fred and I would defend ourselves against their hurtful comments. Since Jimmy and his wife never listened to us and continued with their hurtful behavior, Fred and I started avoiding them as much as possible. They were awful to us but pretended to be nice in front of Diana, so she never knew their true nature. We didn't want to worry Diana, so we never told her about Jimmy and his wife's behavior. One holiday, Fred, Diana, and I planned to go out for a meal. We went to my in-laws' house at the agreed time, expecting Diana to be ready at the front door as usual. But this time, she wasn't there. We waited for a while, thinking she'd come out soon. After 5 minutes, then 10, we started to worry. Diana wasn't answering her phone either. Getting anxious, we rang the doorbell, but there was no response. We used our spare key to get inside. "Hey, Mom," Fred called out, but there was still no answer. Feeling uneasy, we searched the house and found Diana collapsed in her room. I screamed and ran to her, while Fred called an ambulance. The house was empty, as Jimmy and his family must have been out. The ambulance arrived in about 8 minutes, but sadly, Diana passed away. It was a stroke. Fred and I couldn't believe she was suddenly gone from our lives. We cried so much, it felt like we'd never stop. Despite our grief, we had to prepare for the funeral. We couldn't stay sad and withdrawn forever. The funeral was small, with close relatives and family. Jimmy, Diana's eldest son, acted as the family representative. We coordinated with Jimmy for the arrangements, but I sensed he wasn't truly mourning Diana's death. At the funeral, he fulfilled his duties as a family representative, but it seemed minimal. After a brief chat with the relatives, I called for Fred as I had left the gathering abruptly. The relatives seemed displeased and looked at Jimmy with disapproval. At the meal with relatives after the funeral, Jimmy was the first to sit down and didn't bother getting up even when Fred greeted him. He just drank beer, and Brittany did the same. Fred and I hurriedly went around thanking the relatives for coming and sharing memories of Diana. Jimmy and Brittany's children were too busy playing with their handheld gaming devices and laughing loudly, which seemed inappropriate for a post-funeral gathering. None of Jimmy's family seemed to mourn Diana's death. The relatives sensed this and avoided speaking with Jimmy and his wife, choosing to share farewells and memories with Fred and me instead. Despite the relatives' changed attitudes, Jimmy's family's behavior remained the same. They kept ordering beer, discussing inheritance and vacation plans, which felt disrespectful considering how much Diana had done for them. I couldn't help but feel disdain toward Jimmy's family. The next day, Fred left early to take care of formalities alone. At home, I checked the mailbox for the newspaper and noticed an envelope inside. I picked it up and was surprised to see it was addressed to me from Diana. How could there be a letter from Diana? I went back to the living room to open it. Inside the letter was something unexpected. Diana had arranged with the church's pastor to send this letter to me after her passing. It included instructions to open a closet in Diana's room at my in-laws' house, find and open a hidden door within the closet, and contact a lawyer Diana had dealt with. The final instruction was to ensure I carefully opened the closet alone and read Diana's letter repeatedly. Though Diana had slender handwriting, it was bold and forceful. Her powerful signature seemed to embody her essence. Deeply moved, I checked the clock. It was 9:00 a.m., and the in-laws' house should be empty now. I quickly got ready and headed there. The children would be at school, and Jimmy and Brittany likely left early. I had seen on Brittany's social media that they were going out together, despite it being the day after Diana's funeral. If the post was accurate, no one would be at the house. I needed to go now. I might not get another chance. Using my key, I entered the house slowly. The absence of Diana's welcoming smile made my heart ache. Pushing back my pain, I went into Diana's room, opened the closet, and reached for the hidden door as instructed in the letter. Thankfully, it opened without a problem. I sighed with relief and checked what was inside. There were the items Diana mentioned in the letter and an additional document. I was overcome with Diana's love and almost cried, but I knew I had to leave quickly. It would be disastrous if someone came back and found me there, especially since Diana's letter instructed that I do this alone. I took the documents with me and returned home. I contacted the lawyer mentioned in Diana's letter to inform them of her passing. Just as I was about to contact Fred and Jimmy's family to plan a gathering, I received a message from Brittany. She said they had important news and wanted everyone to gather at the in-laws' house this week. What could Brittany possibly want to discuss? I had no idea. Feeling skeptical but uneasy about refusing, I decided to accept Brittany's suggestion to gather at the in-laws' house over the weekend. When Fred and I arrived, I felt tense. Jimmy and Brittany had unpleasant smirks on their faces, and their children were not around, likely left with someone else. As soon as we sat down, they presented us with a document. "This is Diana's will," Brittany declared confidently. The signature on the will was indeed Diana's, and it stated that all her assets were to be inherited by Jimmy and his wife. It says here that we, the couple, are to inherit the entire estate. So you guys won't get a single cent from the inheritance. Too bad? Jimmy laughed vulgarly, his face twisted in an ugly grin. Fred was perplexed, but I silently stood up and returned with Mr. Smith, the lawyer who had been waiting outside. Jimmy and Brittany were confused by the sudden appearance of the lawyer, and Fred was surprised, not knowing the lawyer had been waiting outside. "This is Mr. Smith, a lawyer who Diana had been close with for many years," I introduced briefly. Jimmy and Brittany's expressions turned to anger. "A lawyer? Why did you bring someone like that here?" Jimmy shouted. "It was Diana's instruction. She wanted Mr. Smith to help with the property settlement agreement to make things smoother," I explained. "We don't need a lawyer." Jimmy slammed his hand on the table, gesturing to Diana's will. Mr. Smith calmly raised his hand. "Are you certain this document was entirely written by Diana herself?" he asked. "Of course it is," Jimmy replied loudly. Mr. Smith shook his head sadly. "This cannot be recognized as a valid will. A holographic will must be entirely handwritten by the person themselves." Mr. Smith pointed out that while the word "will" at the beginning and Diana's signature at the end were handwritten, the rest of the document looked like it had been printed from a computer. The once noisy room fell silent. In a panic, Jimmy reached for the will. But that changed nothing. The printed text remained unchanged. "Could this will have been forged?" Mr. Smith asked calmly. Jimmy and Brittany visibly trembled. "What are you talking about? We would never do such a thing." "Why are you being so paranoid? And even if it was forged, what then?" Brittany responded anxiously. "Forging a will is a serious crime," Mr. Smith explained. Jimmy and Brittany's faces turned pale. They were flustered, shouting incoherently and making excuses. At this moment, Mr. Smith delivered the crucial information. Olivia had a notarial will, rendering the presented will invalid. Jimmy and Brittany were astonished, their eyes wide open. "What's that?" "We weren't informed," they explained. The letter from Diana that I had received mentioned that a notarial will was hidden behind the secret door in the closet. We didn't know about it until we received the letter from Diana recently. Diana revealed the location of this will in the letter, which contained not only practical matters, but also explanations about why the notarial will was made and why it was disclosed to me. Diana had been feeling her health decline recently and prepared a will, suspecting that Jimmy and his spouse might tamper with it. Despite my assumption that Diana was completely unaware of Jimmy and his spouse's true nature, it appears Diana had some inkling of their greed for money. The notarial will stated that the estate was to be equally divided between Jimmy and Fred. Jimmy and Brittany were in shock, their eyes wide with astonishment. At that moment, Jimmy seemed to have an epiphany and exclaimed loudly, "That's right. But the beneficiary of Mom's life insurance is me, isn't it? It must be set to me, the eldest son." I announced in a cold voice, "In addition to the notarial will, Diana also entrusted me with a life insurance policy. I am named as the beneficiary, inside the hidden door of the closet. There was not only the notarial will, but also the life insurance policy." Jimmy and his wife stared at the documents in disbelief. "I didn't hear about this. I don't know anything about this," Jimmy protested, banging on the table. "It's normal not to be notified when the beneficiary of a life insurance policy is changed," I replied calmly. Fred, looking puzzled, asked me, "When did Mom entrust Olivia with these?" I had no idea. Did she not want to tell me? I smiled at Fred and explained, "It was written in the letter from Diana. She wanted to tell you as well, but it was safer to entrust it to just me to avoid Jimmy and his wife catching on." "I see. You and Mom were really close after all," Fred remarked. While Fred and I were talking, Brittany interrupted us hysterically. "I won't accept this. Why should you, whom never even showed Diana your children, inherit her estate? This is ridiculous. I can't accept this at all." "That's right. You childless ingrates don't deserve Mom's estate. We lived with her just for the inheritance. It's outrageous to split it. The entire estate should be ours," Jimmy exclaimed angrily. Brittany was red-faced and yelling, continuing with her selfish claims. "We have 3 children, you know. As compensation for not giving Diana grandchildren, you should relinquish the entire estate to us for our children's future. We who gave her 3 grandchildren are far more worthy than you, so the estate should all be ours." Unfazed by Brittany's fervor, I calmly stated, "What you're saying is nonsensical. Please calm down, Brittany." Infuriated by my composed demeanor, Brittany yelled, "Your smug attitude is infuriating. Just give us the money, useless woman." She then lunged at me. Fred and Mr. Smith quickly intervened, but Brittany managed to punch me in the head before they could stop her. "Ouch!" I cried out. Brittany's hands, adorned with several large rings, felt like brass knuckles, causing a dull pain that made me cry out, "Stop it." Fred and Mr. Smith pulled Brittany away, but she still unrestrainedly reached out to me again in her frenzy, demanding, "Give me the inheritance. I deserve it all more than you do. I have 3 children after all." Brittany's eyes were bloodshot, her face demonic. Jimmy encouraging Brittany in such a manner enraged Fred, who called the police. "Go on, do it," he urged. Soon after their arrival, Fred and Mr. Smith explained the situation to the police. Jimmy and his spouse were then taken away by the police. Left behind, Fred and I thanked Mr. Smith and decided it was best for him to go home for the day. What was supposed to be just a discussion about creating a property settlement ended up being a terrible ordeal. Fred and I solemnly agreed to visit later with some sweets as an apology. Fred was very concerned about me being hit by Brittany, but when I told him that the headache had completely subsided, he seemed relieved. Amidst the tumultuous developments, I muttered to myself, that was quite an intense experience. Then, Fred shared his thoughts with me. "You know, Brittany always makes a big deal about her kids. She's always said how great she is for giving Mom 3 grandchildren. Don't you think she's too obsessed with money?" "Indeed," I replied. Brittany had always overly emphasized her children, and her greed for money earlier was intense. "Well, yes," Fred continued. "Even with the inheritance, Diana wanted to divide it equally. Brittany's desire to claim everything was abnormal, and her terrifying demeanor while hitting me was chilling." Fred fell silent, lost in thought. "What's wrong? Is something bothering you?" I asked, unsure of what Fred was getting at. "Yeah, there's something I've been thinking about," Fred replied. "I want to suggest to my brother that we should do DNA testing for his 3 children." I was taken aback by Fred's unexpected suggestion. "DNA testing?" "Yes, and I'm thinking of suggesting an investigation into Brittany's background too. Something just doesn't sit right with me. It's just a hunch." Although I felt it might be unnecessary, I knew Fred's instincts had often been right in the past. "All right, if you think so, let's propose it to Jimmy." When Fred brought up the matter with Jimmy, Jimmy ridiculed and yelled fiercely at him. "Just because you can't have kids, don't go doubting mine," Jimmy protested, snatching the DNA testing information from Fred as they parted, indicating some underlying concern on his part. The first results from the DNA testing of Jimmy and the children revealed that the 2 youngest were not biologically related to Jimmy. I had my suspicions about the youngest since they didn't really resemble either parent, but the middle child too. Fred was speechless. Perhaps motivated by the results, Jimmy also conducted a thorough investigation into Brittany's background. It was revealed that Brittany had relationships with multiple men even before marrying Jimmy. Moreover, she had recently been discovered by the wives of her lovers, who then demanded compensation from her. Brittany, who spent more time at home than Jimmy, had been meticulously hiding this correspondence. The total amount of compensation demanded was far beyond what could be covered by Brittany's salary or savings. As a result, Brittany was desperately trying to secure Diana's entire estate for herself. Naturally, this led to a violent confrontation between Jimmy and Brittany, throwing objects at each other and engaging in a physical fight. Their confrontation escalated to the point where blood was shed, and a neighbor, unable to tolerate the noise any longer, called the police. The arriving officers ended up taking both parties away. Already under scrutiny for forging Diana's will, now they had committed assault as well. When the police investigated the 2, it seems they uncovered numerous other offenses, including theft and harassing wealthy individuals. As a result, Jimmy and his spouse were sentenced to prison. Fred and I were deeply troubled about what to do with the 3 children left behind. With Diana gone, we were their closest relatives. After considering taking in Brittany and Jimmy's children, we ultimately decided against it. The children had fully absorbed their parents' attitudes, openly disparaging us as incapable and childless. The eldest, Ricky, who was 14, was old enough to understand right from wrong, and even the youngest, at 7, should have had some sense of appropriate behavior. Yet each time they saw us, All three sneered and hurled insults. Even with their parents' arrest and being at the heart of the turmoil, their attitudes remained unchanged. "We'd be doing you childless losers a favor by letting you raise us," Ricky remarked. Faced with such hostility, we felt neither love for the children nor the belief that we could raise them to be decent individuals. In the end, we contacted Brittany's parents and decided to cease all involvement with the children. It seemed the children themselves understood our firm stance, as Ricky remarked. "We'd rather stay in a rundown house than stay with a useless couple without kids." We felt this was for the best, especially since they expressed such sentiments. It's worth noting that we never disclosed to the children the fact that the two younger ones were not biologically related to Jimmy. Whether to reveal the truth or not is something we've left to Jimmy, Brittany, and their relatives. Fred and I decided to use the estate Diana left us to make a fresh start by moving to a distant location. It was a place rich in nature with lots of greenery, and both Fred and I were able to fit in quickly. There's a charming waffle shop near our new home, and every time we pass by, I think of Diana and how I would have loved to take her there if she were still alive. Soon after we moved, I was blessed with the child I had long wished for. When I used the pregnancy test and saw the positive result, I couldn't help but shout in surprise and overwhelming joy. Later, when I went to the obstetrician-gynecologist and had it confirmed by the doctor, I was assured that I was indeed pregnant without a doubt. Fred and I embraced, both of us shedding tears of joy. I couldn't help but think how happy Diana would have been if she were still alive to witness this. Additionally, the business plan I have been quietly preparing is progressing well. Both Fred and I are working hard for our forthcoming child, leading fulfilling lives filled with happiness.